We're on PARSHA Beshalach. It's always an exciting one. And it begins, excuse me, with Vayihi Beshalach Paro Esa'am. And so it says that it was that Pharaoh sent out the nation, the Jewish people. V'lo nacham Elokim derech eretz plishtim, and God did not send them by way of the land of the Philistines, the Plishtim, ki karovhu, because it was close. Ki amar Elokim, because God said, pen yinachem ha'am berosa milchama b'shuvu Mitzrayim, because what will happen is that the Jewish people are going to see a war. They're going to be, they're afraid they're going to get attacked, and they'll go back to Egypt. That's why he says that they are not going to go by way of the land of Plishtim. So this already causes a lot of questions. Because it's close, they shouldn't go that way. Anywhere they go, if they travel for 10 hours, they're only 10 hours away, no matter what direction it is, right? 10 hours walking is 10 hours walking. So what's the difference that they didn't go by way of the Plishtim? So, and a simple understanding, Rashi explains it, is because they were afraid they're going to go to war with the Plishtim. Right? If they go that way, the Plishtim will go to attack them, and they're still close to Egypt, and they'll come back. Right? That's on a simple level. Why it makes a difference is if they would go a different way, like the way they went, they're not entering anybody's land. They're in an empty area. Nobody owns this land. It's a desert. So they won't have a war, so they won't be disappointed and go back to Egypt. So on a simple level, it makes some sense. The commentaries tell us another thing, which is, here the Jews, imagine, here they went through this whole thing with the 10 plagues after hundreds of years of being slaves, and now they're leaving Egypt. So you'd think they're going to leave Egypt. The game's over now. Now we're free. Now we can start building the Jewish people. There's not going to be any trouble right away. Like why would God cause trouble for them after all they went through to get out? And suddenly it's like, we work. A guy goes and he doesn't have any money, and he saves up every week to buy a lottery ticket, and then finally after 5 years he wins like $50 million, and then the day he gets it, he dies. Like all of this work and everything, and nothing happens. Like that. So why would that happen here? So some of the commentaries tell us that we can understand this differently. When it says that God didn't take them by way of the land of the Plishtim, ki karovhu, because they're like relatives. A karov is a relative, right? In Hebrew, someone literally means close. Somebody who is close to you means a relative, somebody who's related. Right? It's used a lot in legal terms that a relative can't be a witness for or against you in a case because they're relatives, right? And they're not necessarily going to be tell the truth, because your brother's prepared to lie for you, right? So that's the idea. So what does it mean here? So it tells us that many times we will be in situations that appears to us that are very difficult situations, very bad situations, and that we have to wonder why these things will happen. Sometimes we have to realize that the reason that they happen is because we have such a close relationship with God, that we're close to God, we're related to God, so to speak. God feels this special bond with the Jewish people, and therefore even though things appear to be extremely difficult, to be terrible for us, really it's like your own brother. Right? Even when things are very, very difficult, and your brother, let's say, is making things hard for you, in the end you realize that he wasn't trying to make it hard for you, he was trying to make it better for you, and it had to be hard at first. In other words, you go to a doctor and you're not feeling well, and the doctor gives you an injection. So you imagine if you come from like a different civilization, and you come in and you see a guy's not feeling well, so he goes to the doctor, and the doctor hurts him. Well, why would he do that? Right? Why would you go and the doctor puts you to sleep and cuts you open because you're sick? Right? Why would he do that to you? You don't understand what an operation is. You don't understand what a doctor does. Right? So here also, we often don't understand what goes on in the world around us. Why is it that every time we turn around, we're having trouble somewhere? Like here we are in Israel today. Right? We have finished. We have war after war with Gaza, and now we finally it's quiet for a little while, and now the Hezbollah in the north is starting up. Right? We don't have enough. Okay, so then we have a problem in Paris, right? And then now again, Iran starts showing up in Lebanon and in Syria, and they want to start start up with us again. Like, isn't it enough already? Like, how many times are we going to have this? So the idea is that the rest of the world can understand, would see this as a punishment. We need to understand that God's relationship with us is such that He's related to us. That is, that sometimes it appears that He is being cruel, but He's never being cruel. He's doing sometimes what a doctor will do. He is doing sometimes it's necessary for us to have pain in order to get rid of the real pain. Right? You have a little bit of pain when you have an injection, right, from the doctor to save you from a great amount of pain of getting the sickness. Right, and that's what that expression is telling us, because things are not going to get better for them in the next little while. So the Torah is warning us to this idea. Because you can imagine, here they get out of Egypt, and then Pharaoh shows up again, and then they have to go through the Red Sea. Right, so then when they finally split the Red Sea, they finally realize that God is, even though things look bad, because you can imagine, here they go to sleep, they wake up in the morning, and they see on this side is water, and on this side is the largest army in the world coming to get them, a bunch of slaves, right? Not very long after they left, 6 days after they left as being slaves, they're coming to get them. So what are we going to do? We're going to drown, right? Like lemmings jump into the water and drown, or are we going to stand here and let them kill us? Which we're going to do. So they're saying, like, what is God doing to us? But if you understand God is your relative, He loves you, and He's going to do only good for you, that ultimately it's going to work out just fine. So you're going to get your injection. You're going to wake up and be afraid. But in a few minutes, God says, go into the water and I'll split it for you. And now the Egyptians will no longer be an issue. Right? That's one of the understandings of what it's telling us here. So that it says, Vayasav Elohim asam derecham bidbar. So therefore, God sent them through the desert, Yam Suf. Right? The Yam Suf is the Hebrew words for what most of us call the Red Sea. But the truth is, the Red Sea is a misnomer. This is not the Red Sea. I guess there is such a thing as the Red Sea, but that's not where the Jews were. They were at what's called the Reed Sea, which is not the same as the Red Sea. But for some reason, we've picked up that expression because it's certainly not in the Hebrew words. Right? There's no word red in that word. And it's a different location. So if you look, for instance, in Rabbi Hirsch, when they translate that, they write Reed Sea. And that's what it was, not the Red Sea. So it says that they come and they get to this point, right, where they're standing right by the Reed Sea, and then it says, V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael mi'eretz Mitzrayim. So at the end of verse 18, it says, with this chamushim, Jewish people came up out of Egypt. What does it mean, chamushim? What is the word? So some people say chamushim means that they had weapons. They came out with weapons. In other words, they were going to go into the desert, go through people's land. They knew they were going to be attacked, so they had to be prepared. So they had the military. They went and they got weapons. That's what it means. And even understanding it that way, that's not the normal words for weapons. And this word chamushim is also the same word as chumashim, which means the Torah, right? The 5 books of Moses, which of course they didn't have yet, but it's a hint that the Jewish people came out of Egypt militarily prepared. How is a Jew prepared for war? Not by being the strongest army, but by being the closest to God. That's how it works. Right? We say from King David, it says some of them come to us with their military, like their wagons, right? Chariots. They come with their military chariots, or they come with their swords. But we come with the Word of God. Right? Now, of course, that doesn't mean we don't prepare ourselves for war. But here it was a miraculous time. When the Jewish people came out of Egypt, they came out with the knowledge of Torah and the relationship with God. What was that? That was weapons. That was their weapons. They were defended by God because of what they went through and who they were. And therefore it was the same as having weapons, because it would guard them against being attacked. All right, then it says, Vayikach Moshe es atzamos Yosef imo. Then it says that Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him. So it's a pretty funny expression, because it should just say, Vayikach Moshe es atzamos Yosef. Moshe took the bones of Yosef. It says the bones of Yosef Yosef, who had died, was put into the Nile. Right, but they put him in. They didn't just throw him in the Nile. They put him in a casket. And then before they left, what had happened is that when Yosef, when he was dying, he asked the Jewish people, please take me to Israel. I don't want to be left in Egypt. So they put him in the Nile, and it says that before they left, they went and they got the casket, and all that was left of him, of course, at that point were bones, because it was 200 years later. So it says the bones of Yosef, and Moshe took them with him. Right now, why does it say? It has to say imo, with him. It says he took the bones of Yosef. Who would he have taken them with? Of course, he took them with himself. Why does the Torah have to add that word to tell us? So it's saying to us that it's much more than that, because you see, the Jewish people were promised that when they leave Egypt, they'd leave with great riches. And it says that during some of the different plagues, the Jews were given the opportunity to collect those riches. Like during the plague of darkness, when the Egyptians were in a darkness that was physical, it was palpable, you could feel it, you couldn't move. Not only they couldn't see, but they couldn't move. Darkness had substance, it was so thick. So, but the Jews didn't have it. So the Jews could go into the house of the Egyptians and see all of their things that they had that were worth money, like all their jewels and their special items. And then afterwards it says that the Jews went and asked the Egyptians to give it to them. The Egyptians were happy enough to get rid of the Jews at this point with all the plagues that they told them they could have whatever they want. And the Jews took all of these riches, and because God promised them. It was sort of like their payment for being slaves for 200 years. Now they're being paid. So they took the riches with them, with the permission of the owners. But Moshe, he understood that real riches are mitzvahs, not money. Money is not really riches. So he went and he took the bones of Yosef. Why? Because, as he says in the next line, Hishbia Hashbias B'nai Yisrael, because Yosef made the Jewish people take an oath, Le'emor Pakod Yifgad Elohim Eschem Yilischem Esasmai Mizeitchem. When God finally takes you out of the land of Egypt, you should bring up my bones with you. Right? Yosef told the Jewish people at that, and before he died. So here they took an oath that they would do so. So Moshe said, a smart person takes mitzvahs. A person who's not a smart takes money, but a smart person takes mitzvahs, because the purpose of money is for us to do mitzvahs. Here he can do a mitzvah. Money is only good while you're alive. Mitzvahs are good even after. So that was why it says that Moshe did that. Right now, this was an extraordinary thing that Moshe went and did that. Right, instead of taking wealth, he took Yosef, because the bones of Yosef, and this teaches us the depth of what Moshe was telling us. Mitzvahs have much more worth than money. They tell a story about this. They say that there was a fellow who was living somewhere in Eastern Europe, and he had no money, and he had a family, had no money. He couldn't support them. He couldn't take care of them. So he hears from a traveler that there's an island on the other side of the world, and on this island, diamonds sit in the sand, and nobody cares. They're just diamonds everywhere. And so the guy figures out, if I go to that island and get the diamonds and come back, my family will have enough money to live the rest of their life. So he saves up his pennies to get money to get on a boat, and he gets like the cheapest one in the longest time, because he doesn't have much money, and he goes on this boat. Now this boat only goes once a year to where he's going, because it's so far away, and people can't afford to take it. So it's once a year. So he gets on the boat, and he goes all the way out to this island on the other side of the world. It'd be like going to the Philippines from here. And it says that he gets off, and he's in this little tiny island, and he looks, and he sees, it's right. There's diamonds all over the sand, and nobody's touching them. Right? I'm just going to collect the diamonds, and I'll go into and I'll go back. He realizes he's got a whole year to collect them before the boat comes back, right? To take him back home. So he starts collecting the diamonds, and he gets tired, and he gets thirsty, and he's hungry. He decides, look, I got all these diamonds, like I'm worth millions. I'll go into the city right here on this island, and I'm going to buy some food and a place to stay. Right? I got so much money. So he goes into the city, and he orders a meal, and he reserves in a hotel, and they come in to pay for the meal, and he says, how's this? He pulls out a little tiny diamond, and they laugh at him. And he said, what are you paying us with diamonds? The whole ground is filled with diamonds. Diamonds aren't worth anything here. What we need is animal fat. We have no animal fat here. There's no animals. So animal fat is a commodity for us. If you want to pay for your meal and you want a hotel, forget the diamonds. Get animal fat. So the guy's like, what am I supposed to do, right? So they're nice to him. They let him go. And the next day he decides he's going to have to find some animal fat. So he goes into the business of animal fat. And he's very fortunate. And he does very well. And he becomes like a multi-millionaire in animal fat. He's got like, over the course of this year that he's waiting to go back, he's got an enormous amount of the SHMOS, right, animal fat. And he's buying whatever he wants. And then the boat's going to be here in a couple days. So he says, you know what, I'm a millionaire in animal fat. I'm going to go back and I'll bring all my animal fat. So he takes all his animal fat and he goes back to the boat comes and he puts it in the hold and off he goes. Now it takes like a month to get back. It's all the way around the world. By the time he gets back, of course, all the animal fat's rancid. It's sitting in the sun. It gets spoiled. He gets back to wherever he is in Europe, gets off the boat, and his wife and his kids are all there. They're excited to see him. They're going to be rich now. And he gets off and he tells them, it's great. You're going to be rich. I worked so hard this year. And they said, okay, you brought us the diamonds. Oh, no, much better. I brought animal fat. And they can smell the boat stinking. And they start taking the animal fat off. And they said, are you crazy? Animal fat? A whole year. We starved waiting for you. And you bring us this and it's destroyed. It's rancid. And this animal fat's not worth anything here. What are you doing? And the guy realizes how stupid he was. Right? How stupid. He had all these diamonds. He didn't take the diamonds. He took the animal fat. And he faints on the spot. And it says that he wakes up like a day later in the hospital. And everybody, his family's around him, and they're all happy. And he said, why is everyone so happy? Well, besides the fact that you're alive, when we brought you to the hospital, we went through your clothes. We found one diamond that was in your pocket, a little diamond. And that was enough money to support us. So the story was a positive story. But how does it fit? The fact is that in this world we have a commodity. It's called money. Right? Money. So you want to make a lot of money. So you can buy whatever you want. You can have security. You don't have to worry about eating. Make a lot of money. Right? So you go to make a lot of money. But then it's time to go home. We die. We're going to die. We go up to heaven, and God says, so what do you got? He says, I got a lot of money. This money, that doesn't do no good. Money's nothing here. I want to see animal fat, and I want to see mitzvahs. Show me mitzvahs. Mitzvahs, they have a worth. Mitzvahs are the real diamonds. Do you have any mitzvahs? Well, I didn't have time to do mitzvahs. I was busy getting my animal fat. So a person will realize, what did I do my whole life? I didn't do the most important thing. The real commodity, the real everlasting, forever way of being rich is to have a lot of mitzvahs, and you faint out of humility in the world to come. And you come back, and God's happy, right? Because you did a couple of mitzvahs, so He rewards you for the mitzvahs you did. But it's not nearly what you could have gotten, right? It's the same idea. Moshe realized that mitzvahs are the real commodity. It has worth forever. Money is only worth something for now. So all the Jews went and took gold and silver, which God said they could do. It's fine. They're allowed to. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with working for a living and making a lot of money. But that wasn't their goal. Their goal should have been, we're making money so we can do mitzvahs. Not we're doing mitzvahs so we can make money. So Moshe realized this, so he wanted them to know it. So he didn't go and gather all the silver and gold. He went out and gathered the bones of Yosef, because it was a mitzvah, because they promised Yosef they would take his bones with them. So that was the mitzvah. So that's what he did. And that's why it says with him, because not only with him now, it was with him in the world to come. All right, it's telling you, Moshe took them here, but he was able to take the mitzvah of honoring the promise to the world to come with him. Right? That's why it uses that word. So that's a very important message that it's telling us before we get the Torah of the importance of mitzvahs versus money of this world. And remember, it's not telling us that we're supposed to be poor or that there's any special righteousness in being destitute or hungry, right, and not working. You're supposed to work and you're supposed to make a living, and there's nothing wrong with being wealthy. Just let's not confuse the goals, right? If our purpose, if we go out and we want to be a millionaire by the time we're 30, right? Or maybe that's not so hard. A multi-millionaire maybe by the time you're 30. Nothing wrong with it. You're going to use your money to support your family. You're going to give tzedakah. You're going to take care of people. You're going to help people, support institutions. Nothing wrong with that, because that's not your real goal. You're making all the money so that you can do mitzvahs. That's really what the goal is, and that's what the message of Moshe is here. Right? And then it goes on that it says that they went out in the English. It says, and they went to this place called Ethem, and Hashem went before them, and there was a pillar of cloud on the way, and at night a pillar of fire, so they could travel day and night. He did not remove the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night from before the people. So there was it's like the pillar of cloud, right? It was like it's hard to imagine. It's almost like a tornado, right? You got like this tornado. It was a cloud that would lead the Jewish people, tell them how are they going? How do you know where to go in the desert? So the cloud would lead them. If the cloud stopped, it meant we're supposed to camp here. You can camp an hour, you can camp a year. As long as it stopped, God wanted you to camp there. When it started to move, they had to get together and start moving. At night, the cloud turned into fire. So why the difference? Because at night you can't see. The fire made it so you could see. So that the Jews had this with them. It also had other purposes. It kept away all the bugs and the wild animals, because the Jews are living in the desert. They're not inside of a house with walls and with a security system. Right? So the pillar also made it so that the scorpions and the snakes and the other desert animals didn't bother them, because it kept them away. Right? So that was considered one of the main miracles of the desert. So now we get to the section, right? Well, Hashem says to Moshe, you should tell the Jewish people, right, that they should go to this certain place where it is, and Pharaoh will say that that the Jewish people are stuck. Let's go get them, right? And so they did. Right? And then in verse 5, it was told to the king of Egypt the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants became transformed regarding the people, and they said, what is this that we have done? They have sent away Israel from serving us. So here now the people come and they tell Pharaoh the Jews have left. Well, Pharaoh knows the Jews left. He tells them to leave. Right? What does that mean? And then he says, boy, did we make a mistake. We made a real mistake. We had these Jews with us, and now they're gone. Right? We had free labor. Now we get angry and they're gone, right? It's the most ridiculous statement that I think you have in the entire Torah, because he knows why they're gone. He got 10 plagues, right? And the last one killed like the firstborn of every single family, right? And he said that's why they're gone. They're not gone because he didn't care about it. They're gone because if he didn't send them out, he'd be dead. So he sent them out. So what does that mean? What did we do? We sent them away. And this shows you how human beings are. It's called cognitive dissonance. The ability for a person to departmentalize their mind, so that they can think one way and do something totally different, right? And not see a contradiction, right? I can say that I'm a rational, logical human being, and then I can believe in things that are totally absurd. I can say it's wrong to talk bad about people, and then I can send out an email that says nasty things about someone, and everybody sees it. And I don't see that as a contradiction. I can say I want to be healthy, and I can eat cake all day. Right? That's all right. I want to be healthy, and I smoke. Right? People do that. They close off parts of their brain. Right? We're all like that. Some worse, some not as bad. Right? That's what he's doing. He's able to say, on the one hand, I lost. God, he's stronger than me. He said, but he won't accept that. He won't. He said, I sent them out. What did I do? I sent them away. Right? Not because he had to send them away, because I chose to send them away. Right? At the same time that he knows that that every single Egyptian family lost members of their family that actually died in one night. Right? Like a few days later, yeah, I did it. It wasn't God who made me do it. I chose to do it. And I made a mistake. Let's go get him. Right? How could he imagine, after all the firstborn children were killed, that a few days later he should go get them, and that he'll get the Jews back? Does he think that God's going to just say, okay? Right? But yeah, he does. And that's how people are. People can act one way and believe a totally different way. That's exactly why you got people doing things today. That's how you can have alcoholics. That's how you can have drug addicted people. How many people who are addicted to drugs say, I want to get addicted to drugs? Everybody who's addicted to drugs says, not me. I'm not going to get addicted. I can stop anytime I want. Same thing with smoking. Same things with drinking. Right? Anything that we do. Not me. I can smoke a cigarette a day. I'm never going to get addicted to it. I can use this drug, and it's not going to. I know people get addicted, but I'll stop before I get addicted, and they never do, right? Because you teach yourself, right? By closing off parts of your mind, you don't realize the fact is 100% of people who use crack cocaine 3 times are addicted. 100%. And Mr. X uses it 3 times. I'm not going to get addicted. Well, what are you? Are you a superhuman? Of course you're going to get addicted. Everybody gets addicted. No, not me. How do they do that? The cigarette companies bank on this, the liquor companies bank on this, everyone banks on this idea, right? That you can close off your mind. It's the same way why governments send 18-year-olds to war. Why don't they send 40-year-olds to war? You could have a very fit 40-year-old man, right? 30-year-old man. Well, how come they don't send them to war? They're more mature, they'll listen to the orders, right? They'll do everything they got to do. So how come you don't do that? The answer is because an 18-year-old thinks he can't die. He thinks he can't die. He can run in. There could be guys with machine guns up there, and they've got 50 of your men hit down in a bunker, and a sergeant can say to you, "Go out there and get those guys," and you'll get up and run across the field to kill 5 guys with machine guns with a pistol. Why? Because I'm not going to die. I'm never, not going to happen to me. Because an 18-year-old thinks that. That's how far this goes. You can go far enough to actually believe that you won't get killed. Right? That's what he's talking about. So it says he goes and he harnesses his chariot and he takes his army with them, and they put on all their fancy stuff because they're going to win and they're going to come back and have a parade. So Egypt pursued them and overtook them by the sea. Right now the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, they came. All right, now in 371, Pharaoh approaches the children of Israel, and the Jewish people look up and they go, "Uh-oh!" Right now we're in trouble. Here he comes. We got one side the army, the other side the water. So the usual idea of Jewish humor is that they look to Moshe and they say, "Were there no graves in Egypt? They got to take us to die in the wilderness." Right? The usual sarcastic, right, gallows humor. "What is it that you have done to us, take us out of Egypt? Is this not the statement that we made to you? Let us be and we'll serve Egypt. Isn't it better to be slaves than to die in the wilderness?" Right? That's what they say right away. They give up. Why? Because they're slaves. These guys have been slaves for 200 years. They think like slaves. Right? Slaves, you put a slave in trouble, he's going to want to go to his master. Right away, and that's what they're saying. So Moshe says, "No, don't worry. God is with you. He will save you." And Moshe then turns and he starts to pray. And God, in verse 15, says to him, "What are you praying for? There's no time for prayer. This is time for action. You're about to get killed. So tell them to go into the sea." All right, and now the Jewish people think this is absurd. We're going to walk. What, I'm going to walk on water? And nobody walked on water then. Right? How are you going to do that? We're going to drown. Right? So Moshe tells them to go in, and finally we have one. The Medrash says that there was one guy by the name of Nachshon ben Aminadav, later becomes Moshe's brother-in-law, and he is Moshe's nephew, the offspring of Moshe's sister, and Nachshon goes into the water first. He's the first one in, and it says that God caused him to go into the water until the water went over his nose. Right? In other words, to the point where he was going to die. And as soon as Nachshon showed that he was prepared to die because he wanted to follow God's word, God split the sea. Right at that moment. So here we see that out of all of the Jewish people, this one person had it within him, this faith, this belief, actualized faith, to actually go and do it, to go into the water when he would die. He would not make it. Right? He's going to go in, his mouth is covered, now his nose is covered, he cannot breathe. In a couple of minutes he'll be dead. That's when God splits the water, to give us that message. Right? That sometimes you have to go right to the edge, and God will always be there for you. And then he splits it. Right? And so it has this whole idea of them splitting it. And we begin what's called the Song of the Sea. The Song of the Sea, which is really what this parsha is referred to as Shabbos Shira, the song, is a song that the Jewish people and Moshe sang as they crossed through on the dry land in between the two parts of the sea, and came out on the other side, turned around and watched the Egyptians chase after them, and the sea closed down on top of them. That's exactly what they saw. And because of it, they had a spontaneous spiritual epiphany, which caused them to sing. It was every person of the Jewish people, all 3 million of them, had the same words. It came to them as a spiritual thing, and they all sang the song as they crossed through the sea. And this is a very significant song. It's not a song like you and I think of songs. This was a prophecy, right, and a high level of thanks to God for saving them, right, as something that you don't plan for. It happened. Right? It only happens a few times in Jewish history that people were on this level that they would actually do this. And it actually begins in the bottom of 374. It begins by saying, right, up until that, it talks about how the Jewish people went in, and the Medrash tells us that there were 12 paths, one for each tribe, and the ground wasn't muddy, it was dry, and there was something over their head so that they wouldn't get the sun on them, and there was all types of trees growing there that they could get fruit as they crossed through if they were hungry, and they were able to come out on the other end with all, not only their wealth that they took with them, but all of the wealth of the Egyptian soldiers who were killed. Right? They all brought all their wealth with them because they were going to have a parade when they brought the Jews back. All of that washed out, and they got all that as well. So this was the amazing thing that happened. So they get to this spiritual level where it says, Az Yashir Moshe, and so the Jewish people and Moshe sang this song to God. Right? The first problem with it is that it's in the future tense. It says Az Yashir does not mean and they sang. It means they will sing. The Jewish people will sing. Moshe and the Jewish people will sing. This is a hint to the idea of the revival of the dead. You know, we have a concept in Judaism that at one time in the future, all the people who have been deceased will come back. Right? And this is where it is. This is the hint. Why? Because in the future, Moshe and the Jewish people will sing. Well, Moshe's dead. Well, and that means in the future, when the Mashiach comes, they'll come and they'll sing again. Right? So this is written in the future tense to hint at that idea. Right, rather than past tense, which is they sang. This is they will sing. So they ask the question, why of all places in the Torah there should be this place that tells us about the revival of the dead, like of anywhere? Like, why should that happen here? And the answer is because the Jewish people at this point had believed, right, that they would be dead. And not only that, we realize that in the plague of darkness, we learned that 80% of the Jews, the Hebrews, died. Only 20% came out. Right? So that would mean basically that pretty much every family lost someone. If 80% died and 20% came out, pretty much everybody must have had somebody in their family dead. Right? So at the one point, they're happy to leave Egypt. At the other point, there's got to be this great sadness. Right? Mourning for people who perhaps they weren't deserving to come out, but you loved them. They were your family. So this is the place that it says, don't give up hope. People will come back. They will come back. They will not. There is a time in the future where people who have died will come back, and we will see, and you will see them. So it gives them this additional hope, right? This feeling that there'll be more for the future. Like they tell many stories about Holocaust survivors. People went into the camps like Auschwitz, right? How many people who went to Auschwitz actually survived? 5%? So it's almost just like this, right? Where 80% of the Jews were killed in Egypt, 20% came out. We can certainly say 80% of the Jews who went through the concentration camps were killed and 20% came out. We call them the survivors, right? So they tell a story about the Baba Rabbi who didn't die that long ago. He went through the war also, and he came to America to rebuild his Hasidic movement. And who could he build it with? The survivors. I mean, these destroyed, lost people who came through a war, who came through concentration camps, who lost their wives and their children and their parents, and they're all alone. And they're moving to New York because there's nowhere else for them. And the Rebbe opens up, and they come. And these are going to be the people who start his movement again, to recreate it, because his movement got destroyed by the Nazis. So he wants to start this Hasidic movement again. So what do? It says that one time it was Shabbos, and they didn't want to sing. He said, how can we sing? I know it's Shabbos, but my wife's dead, my husband's dead, my father's dead, my kids are dead, my whole family's dead. I saw things you'd never believe. How am I supposed to sing? Right? So it says that the Rebbe explained to them from this section that you need to understand that you lost, and you should feel the pain. But the Jewish people lost 80% when they came out of Egypt, and they sang. They sang at the sea because they understood from this song that people who die, you will see them again. So I'm telling you the same. Sing on this Shabbos, and you will see that the time will come where you will see those people again. It's the same idea. That's why we find it in here that it talks about this idea of the revival of the dead in this part of the Torah. We also have another section in here, on the next page, in the middle of 376, literally in the middle of that page in the Hebrew, it says the word Zeh Keli V'Anvehu, which means, this is my God, and I will praise him. Zeh Keli, this is my God, V'Anvehu, and I will praise him. Praising here is using the same word as beautify. And this is the source in the Torah for us to know that there's an idea of doing mitzvahs, beautifying mitzvahs. Like I can go buy tefillin for $200, but they're not very good. They're kosher. I'll get by. But there's an idea of going out and buying a nicer pair of tefillin. It might even cost me $1,000. And a nice case to put them in. And a nice bag with my name on it. Well, where does all that come from, that I should do all that with my money? From here. That this is my God, and I will beautify him. These are the mitzvahs he gives us. I will beautify them. All right, so we have silver Kiddush cups, and we have beautiful Torah covers, and we have beautiful synagogues. All comes from this idea that God wants us to beautify the mitzvahs, to make them not only meaningful and worthwhile, but to show how special they are by making it beautiful. Like, how much more special is the Torah? Because we have a beautiful silk cover, right, velvet and silk cover, and we put silver breastplate and a silver crown, and right, thousands of dollars worth of things on it. Right? These are showing that how important it is to us. If you have something that's important, you want to make it look good, and that's important to us, so we make it look good. So they ask the question again: why is that here? Anywhere in the Torah you could have put it. Why does God put it here at the splitting of the sea? So this is like what I told you before. When it was time to split the sea, right? When God split the sea, what was the goal? To save the Jews and destroy the Egyptian army. That was the purpose, right? Was there any reason that God had to put fruit trees in the water, that they should be able to eat apples if they get hungry as they're walking through? How long do you think it took them to get through? They're walking across the sea. Half a day? How hungry could they get at that moment that they have to stop and eat an apple? Right? How about that you can imagine that if this was a sea and God took the waterway, it's going to be muddy. The ground's going to be muddy. You walk through that, it's going to mess up your feet and your shoes, right? But he didn't. It says that God made it totally dry. And he put a shade over their head. Right? Why? It's enough. Just save their lives. What are you doing all this stuff for? Right? So it says the reason is because God went out of his way and he said, I want to save my people, but if I'm going to save them, I want to make it comfortable for them. I want them to be happy. I want them to have what they need. It's not enough to just save them. I love the Jewish people. If you love someone, you do it. Like when a man buys his wife flowers, does anyone need flowers? Is there any, like purpose, real purpose, like for the use of flowers? No, there's no purpose. They beautify, the room. They beautify your relationship, but there's no purpose, right? Why do you do it? Because a man loves his wife, it makes her happy. He wants to give her something that enhances her, so he gives her flowers, right? That's what God said. It's not enough I'm going to save the Jews. I love the Jews. I want to make it so that they're safe, and that they're not hungry, and that they're dry, and that everything works for them. So he did all this extra. So that's exactly why this is the place where it tells us that if you have a mitzvah, it's not enough just to do it. Do the extra part too. Make a silver case for it. Make it look nice. Make it pretty. Pay the extra couple bucks to do that. That's why it's found here in this place, because of that reason. Right? Now, we go on past this. Past the section dealing this with the song. The Jewish people, right? Well, just to tell you quickly, after the men go through, it says that Miriam, she went with the women together. So the men went in one group, and the women went another group. And the men sang, and the women sang, but they were separate. Right? It said, if you look on 381, Miriam, the prophetess, sister of Aaron, took the drum in her hand, and all the women went after her with the drums and with dances. And Miriam spoke to them, sing to God, she says. Right? So you see, they did also. Now that ends in the bottom of 381. They're now out of the sea. They see all the Egyptians are dead. Now they're on their way to get the Torah. So it says, Moses caused Israel to journey from the Sea of Reeds, and they went out to the wilderness of Shur, and they went for a 3-day period in the wilderness. Okay, so now the Jews left. And again, if they just went through this experience where God goes, not only gets them through it, but gives them all these beautiful luxuries, right? Now they have to go for 3 days in the desert, and they don't have any water. 3 days without water. It's like, it never gets better. There's always a problem. So here they go. They did not find water. Then it says, and they came to Marah, a place called Marah, and there was water there, right? It was an oasis. They could not drink the water of Marah because they were bitter. So it says and that's why they called it Marah. Marah means bitter in Hebrew. The people complained against Moshe, and they said, what are we going to drink? You take us all the way out in the middle of the desert, nothing to drink, we're going to die again. There's not enough graves in Egypt, you had to take us out here. So he cries to God, and God tells him, you see that tree over there? From that tree, right, take a branch and throw it in the water, and the water will taste better. Now it was a bitter tree. He took a bitter branch from a bitter tree, threw it in the bitter water, and it made the water sweet. Right? That's what happens. And now they can drink the water. And they did. Now, if we look back at the words, there's a problem in the words here too. Because in the Hebrew it says, Vayivo Marasa, right? It says they came to a place called Marah. V'lo yachol ishtos mayim. They couldn't drink the water. Mimara, from this place. Why? Ki marim heim. Right? So that, I told you it means because the water was bitter. But it can just as easily mean something else, which is they were bitter. Because heim is plural. Because they were bitter. It's perfectly easy to read that way. So that, why couldn't the Jews drink the water? Because the Jews were bitter. What does that mean? It says that when you have people who are bitter, who are difficult, who you can't please, no matter what you do for them, you can't make them happy. And that's just how some people are. You can try and you can try and you can try and you can't. And the end result is it's not what you did that was bad, it's they are. It's not that you made, you come to my restaurant and you order soup and you tell me the soup is bitter. And everybody else eats the soup and they say it's not bitter. So I say, okay, I throw it away and I make a new soup for you and you say it's bitter. And I give you a third one, you say it's bitter. And you keep complaining. So finally I'm going to have to say, sir, it's clear we can't make you happy. We'll give you your money back. We can't serve you. We can't do it. It's just not possible. And what's in my head, I'm not going to say to him because I'm the owner of the restaurant, is this guy's bitter. It's not the soup. His taste buds, they're bitter, right? So God is saying, not that the water was bitter, the people were bitter. That is to say that no matter what God does for them, it's never good enough. God takes them out of Egypt, he crosses the Red Sea, he kills all the Egyptians, he makes them rich, and now they go for 3 days without water. Okay, that's tough, right? But God's there. He's not going to let you die. What's going on? Why are you getting so upset? We're going to go back to Egypt. Cut it out already. You got a whole history with God's trying to help you, and you keep, every time something doesn't go the way you want, you go the opposite direction. It's no good, right? Why? Because they are bitter, and that's a problem. And you have that in every organization, every shul, every institution. You've got people who are bitter. Not everybody, of course, some. And no matter what you do, they spend most of their time making other people feel bad. So that everyone will be bitter. You can have a shul where we really do try to make people happy here. I spend a lot of my time talking about it and doing things that people should feel welcome and happy. That's, in my opinion, one of the main reasons to come here. We're not the most beautiful shul. We're not the biggest shul. We don't have the largest membership. We don't have all of your friends here. What we have is a place where you should walk in the door and feel welcome and feel that people want you here. And it's very important. And I've been working at that for years. And yet you'll always have one or two people, no matter what you do, are always going to be, verbisoners, right? They're going to be always upset. Nothing makes them happy. And not only that, they're going to do whatever they can to make everybody around them the same. because how can I be upset? You know, the rabbi did this, and the gabbai did this, and this one forgot this, and this one did that, and look at how, you know, the newsletter came out and it's on pink paper, it should be on white paper, and there's a spelling mistake here, and this is wrong, and that's wrong, and they could be right, that could be true. Well, let's put this in perspective, fella, yeah, right? 99% of what goes on, you're happy with. 1% you're not happy with, and you're going around and getting everybody upset, and now everyone's unhappy because you're doing that, right? That's what it means you're bitter. So how do you, right, and so what do? So first thing, Moshe teaches them a lesson that God tells him. If you have bitter water, you know how you make it sweet? By putting a bitter stick in it. Take a stick that's bitter and put it in there, and it gets sweet. What does that mean? He's saying that it only looks bitter. It's not really bitter. The water's not bitter. You're bitter, right? So, and how do I know? Because I put more bitter stuff in the water and it suddenly becomes not bitter. How's that happen? Because I'm telling you, you are the one. You're the problem. Fix your problem and the water will be sweet. Not that God will change it. In your head it'll change. Like later on, God gives us the manna, right? One of the traits of the manna is that whatever it tastes like, whatever you want it to taste like is what it tastes like. If you get the manna, you got the same thing every day, right? This piece of dough that comes from heaven. Every day in the desert, they would wake up in the morning, go out and get it. And one day you feel like oatmeal, tastes like oatmeal. Next day you want frosted flakes, frosted flakes. Next day Captain Crunch, Captain Crunch. Next day you want a barbecue, it's a barbecued steak. Whatever you want. So after this goes on for a number of years, it says in the Torah that the Jews go to Moshe and they say, it's enough already, right? Our souls are disgusted by this man. Like, what do you mean that your soul is disgusted by the mud? Like, that's a pretty strong statement. You say, all right, you know, I'm a little tired of this mud. Okay, yeah, it tastes like whatever we want, but, you know, enough already. I want something different. What can you have different? The mud tastes like whatever you want. There's no waste from it. That means all the stomach problems and the problems that we have, right, from getting rid of the waste from our body, nope, doesn't happen. You know, there's no waste, right, because this special bread comes from heaven, right? You can't eat too much and get fat. You can't get too little and be hungry. It always worked exactly what you want. So what's disgusting you about this? It tastes what you want it to taste like. It has the consistency of what you want. You can sit at a table with your family, and this one kid, you know how it is, you go home, this kid wants a hot dog, and this one wants hamburgers, and this one wants lasagna. And so what is my mother used to say, I'm making one dinner. You can eat it or not eat it. I'm only making one dinner, right? Well, God says, I'm making everybody their own dinner, whatever you want. You can have steak, you can have ice cream, whatever you want, you can have. So how do they say it's disgusting? Where did that come from? It disgusts us. That's the word they use. It's a real strong word. Because they were bitter. It's them who were the problem, not the mun. They're the problem. And it's the same problem here. If you are a bitter person, if you're a negative person, if you hang out with negative people, that's how you're going to be. You're going to be bitter. No matter what I do for you, what you do for someone else, what a friend does for you, if somebody is bitter, it's never good enough. It's never good at all. And it ends up bad. Right? No matter what, if that person's that way. And that's something that it's very important. People need to work on that because they shouldn't be that way. It's necessary to not act in such a manner. Otherwise, we're going to, you know, our whole lives is going to be bitter, 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 bitter. And it keeps going on, page after page. On 385, they're again complaining to Moshe, right? They don't have any meat now, right? Hashem will give you meat to eat and bread to eat. What are you complaining about? Why you keep going on? And then finally God says, I heard the complaints of the Jewish people. Speak to them. Tell them in the afternoon you'll have meat. In the morning you'll have bread. And you should know that I'm God. And then he starts sending them this manna, this man from heaven, right? Manna. And it tastes like whatever they want it to taste like. Right? And on Fridays they get two times so they can have for Shabbos without collecting it. Everything that's good. Right? But then we get to this point on 391. Moshe cries out to God, saying, "What shall I do for this people? A bit more, and they will stone me." Right? That's how they're complaining so much. So God tells them, right? All right, they want water. Go over there, and this is where he hits the stone with his stick, and water comes out, and everybody has water. Like, no matter what God does for them, whatever Moshe does for them is never good enough. And then this tells you the result right now. This is the result of what happens in the bottom of 391. If everybody is bitter and people do not appreciate what they get from each other or from God, then verse 8 begins. Amalek came and battled Israel in Rephidim. So Amalek is a grandson of Esau. Amalek is known as the epitome of anti-Semitism. He hates good because it's good. He hates good because it's good. He is the example of evil in the world. He wants anything good upsets him, he wants to destroy it. He only wants evil. So he is the arch enemy of the Jewish people. His goal in the world is to make the world a bad place, while our goal is to make it a better place. And that's what Amalek is. Amalek is, to us, we know that Haman was Amalek in the story of Purim. Many people refer to Hitler as Amalek. Right? We don't know for sure, but they say Hitler was Amalek. Right? In other words, he was an example of evil to the extent, right? So here it says that Amalek comes and he battles the Jewish people in Rephidim. What do I care where they were? Like some little town in the middle of the desert. What is this Rephidim? So it tells you why he came. Rephidim means that they withheld in Hebrew. That's what it means. There is Refid Yadayim. They held back their hands. The Jewish people held back their hands from understanding Torah. And they were complaining all the time. As soon as the Jewish people stop learning and living and understanding Torah, then Amalek comes. That's a fact. As soon as God sees that we're not doing what we're supposed to do, he tries to remind us. Sometimes, like if you have a kid, if you tell your kid, I want you to, every day before you go to school, you got to make your bed. And he keeps forgetting. Or he keeps not doing it. Right? Doesn't do it. So at first you say, look, I'll give you 50 cents allowance, but you have to make your bed every day. Right? You want to give him the 50 cents anyways, but he is tied into that. Right? And he still doesn't make his bed. And he wants the 50 cents now. Right? That's not going to work. So what do? You say, if you don't make your bed, I'm going to charge you 10 cents a day. You'll end up paying me 70 cents a week. That's even more than the money I give you for doing it. So do it, you'll make money. Don't do it, you'll lose money. Right? Then he'll do it. Right? That's what's happening here. If the Jews want to act bitter, and they want to act in this way, and they want to stay away from Torah, which is our source of life, so God will try to positively reinforce us. What he'll do, he'll give us manna, he'll give us water, he'll give us meat. Right? It doesn't help. We're still bitter after he does what we ask. Now he sends Amalek. Amalek's going to come, and he's going to be the negative reinforcement. He's going to be the one who's going to go to war, and he's going to kill it. He's going to hurt you. Right? Wake up. If you don't start doing what you're supposed to do, I don't need you. That's what God's saying. So he sends Amalek. So here Moshe shows us an amazing example of how we're able to battle Amalek. So Moshe says to Joshua, choose people for us to go to battle with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. Joshua did as Moshe says to him to do battle with Amalek. And Moshe, Aaron, and Hur. So Moshe is Moshe, Aaron is his brother, Hur is his sister's husband, Moshe's sister's husband, whose child is Nachshon, that I talked about before. So Moshe, Aaron, and the male representation of his sister's family, right, went up on the mountain. And it happened that when Moshe raised his hands, Israel was stronger. And when he lowers his hands, Amalek was stronger. So Moshe's hands were being held up, and they got heavy. So he took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur, each one held up one of his hands. And because of it, Joshua, who led the army, weakened Amalek and its people with the sword's blade. Right? So here, what happens? They have the Jews are doing something wrong. God sends Amalek. Amalek goes to war with them. Right? The Jews realize this is not the way we're supposed to be. So Moshe says, I'm going to show them the answer to the problem. Right? What does he do? Moshe doesn't go fight. Moshe goes up on a mountain, and he holds his hands up. He says, when he holds his hands up, the Jews win. When he puts his hands down, the Jews lose. That makes no sense. What is it, like a military thing? What it is that when it says in the Mishnah that when Moshe lifted his hands, the Jewish people looked up at his hands, and they looked into heaven. And they said, God will help us. And when the Jewish people were despondent and they said, nobody is here to help us, Moshe's hands got heavy and he couldn't hold them come up anymore, and they would lose the war. And whenever Moshe's hands were all the way up, the Jewish people were inspired, and they said, we're going to follow the way of God, and they were winning the war. Eventually it got to the point where the Jewish people realized what was happening, and they became optimistic, and Moshe's hands were up, and they followed God, and they won the war. And it closes by saying that Hashem says to Moshe, write this as a remembrance in the book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I shall surely erase the memory of Amalek from under the heaven. So God tells him, remember this. You act in the right way, I will erase Amalek from under the heaven. There will be no more Amalek. We didn't, and there still is Amalek. It still exists, not under that name, but it's Haman, and it's Hitler, and others like it. Moshe built an altar, and he called its name Hashem is my miracle, and he said, for the hand of God is on the throne. Hashem maintains a war against Amalek from generation to generation. So God will fight Amalek for us. Right? That's the basis of it. We have a mitzvah to remember Amalek, so that we should remember how to act. That Amalek's job is to cause us to take the goodness out of the world, to take real belief in God out of the world, to take a positive lifestyle out of the world, and to make the world a place that is just what I want, just for me. I don't care about anyone else. That's who Amalek was, and that's what Amalek wanted. And today he still exists, and this is where we see it. So what we have here are a series of messages. All of these messages are very fundamental, right? Belief in God, acting on your beliefs, not being bitter, not giving up hope. These are all fundamental concepts of Jewish life. Why are they all here? Because next week we get the Torah. So God, in the PARSHA we get the Torah. So the idea is that God wants us to understand fundamental concepts of Jewish philosophy, of Jewish life, before he gives us the Torah, so that we should know how important the Torah is, what it'll do for us, what will happen when we don't do it. Right? Now, understand, I'm not saying that if a person keeps the Torah, their life will be idyllic, it'll be perfect. In fact, in many cases, people who keep the Torah, their lives are very, very much like a roller coaster, right? Good and bad. But one thing I can tell you, that if a person who keeps the Torah, whatever it looks like is going on in their life, it's happening because God loves them and wants to do good for them. That's why. Sometimes it doesn't appear good, but in the long run, it is good. There's when I was studying this idea, I'll just tell you a story and then we can stop. It's that there was a fellow, and I actually saw his name, was working for one of the financial firms in the World Trade Center. And the Monday before, I think if I remember, September 11th was a Tuesday, I think. So the Monday before, the Friday before, he got a pink slip. Right? We don't need you anymore. And I said, what am I going to do? I'm a 30-year-old married man, and I live in New Jersey. I commute every day to New York to work. Right? I'm in the financial area. How am I supposed to support my family, take care of my kids? How am I supposed to do anything? I don't have a job, right? And he goes in on Friday, and they they have a security guard, right? Bring him, so he should only take his own stuff and not harm anything, right? A guy who's been loyal and honest, they treat him like garbage, and he leaves on Friday, and he feels horrible. Like, this is how they treat me after all these years I'm working here. I'm an honest person. They treat me like this, right? And I don't know what I'm going to do. How am I going to make a living? And then along comes Monday, right? And he's looking for a job, and Tuesday morning comes, and his office is destroyed, and everyone who was in there was killed, and he's not. So was it bad that he lost his job? God could have stopped it. That God wanted him to live or to die. He wanted him to live. But he couldn't just say to him, I want you to live, don't go to work today. Right? He did it in this way that it appeared that that bad things were happening to him. But there weren't bad things happening to him. There were good things that happened to him, which saved his life. Now, I can make up a million stories like that, except this one, like when I read it, it actually everybody's name in there. Like, I mean, and these people are still alive. I can call them on the phone and ask them about the story. These are true. These are true. There are many, many examples of it where amazingly positive things come out of what appears to be bad.